Picture a forest unlike anything you've ever seen, where trees don't rise straight toward the sky, but twist and spiral like frozen dancers caught mid-movement. This is the dancing forest of Russia's Curonian Spit, a place where nature seems to defy its own rules. Why would trees grow in such impossible shapes, some looping like coiled springs, others bending sharply as if bowing to some unseen force? For decades, scientists, locals, and visitors have stood beneath these twisted branches, utterly baffled. Some whisper of supernatural forces at work, while others insist there must be a logical explanation hidden beneath the soil. But one thing is certain: this isn't just a quirk of nature. It's a full-blown mystery, one that challenges everything we think we know about how trees grow. What could possibly cause such strange formations? The theories are as wild as the trees themselves. Some point to ancient geomagnetic anomalies, invisible forces pulling at the roots. Others blame parasitic fungi or even the relentless Baltic winds, sculpting the trunks over time like invisible hands. But here's the twist: none of these explanations fully solve the puzzle. The dancing forest doesn't follow the usual patterns of wind-shaped trees elsewhere in the world. These bends and loops are too precise, too deliberate, as if each tree is following some secret choreography. And that's what makes this place so hauntingly fascinating. It's not just about the what, it's about the why, the story waiting to be uncovered. So let's step into the shadows of these twisted giants and unravel the enigma together. From scientific studies to local legends, from soil samples to spine-tingling eyewitness accounts, we're about to explore every clue left behind in this living labyrinth. Whether it's nature's hidden hand or something even more extraordinary, one thing's for sure: by the end of this journey, you'll never look at a forest the same way again. The dancing forest doesn't just bend trees, it bends reality, and we're here to find out how. Nestled along the Curonian Spit, a narrow stretch of sand dunes separating the Baltic Sea from the Curonian Lagoon, the dancing forest feels like a place time forgot. This remote corner of Russia's Kaliningrad region isn't just geographically isolated, it's eerily out of step with the natural world. While most forests here grow straight and tall, this one bends, warps, and spirals in ways that seem almost intentional. The first recorded accounts of these twisted trees date back to the 1960s, when Soviet scientists stumbled upon them during a routine survey. But locals had known about the forest for generations, passing down stories that blurred the line between fact and folklore. Some say the trees began their strange dance after a mysterious event, a lightning storm, a buried artifact, or perhaps something far older and stranger. What makes this forest even more unsettling is its contrast to the surrounding landscape. Just beyond the twisted grove, pine trees stand rigid and uniform, as if obeying nature's rules. But step into the dancing forest, and the ground itself feels different, softer, quieter, as though the earth is holding its breath. Visitors often describe a prickling sense of being watched, a whisper of movement just beyond sight. And it's not just the trees that unsettle. The local legends here are thick with warnings: don't linger after dark, don't touch the twisted trunks, and never ever try to count them. Stories tell of travelers who ignored these warnings and vanished, or returned with their memories frayed at the edges. Scientists, of course, have tried to demystify the phenomenon. They've measured the soil, tested the groundwater, even studied the trees' DNA. Yet the most compelling theories, shifting sands, underground streams, even peculiar magnetic fields, still leave gaps. Why do some trees twist while others nearby remain untouched? Why do the bends often spiral in the same direction, like a secret code written in bark? And why does the air here feel so charged, as if the forest is waiting to reveal itself? Whether you believe in science or the supernatural, one thing's undeniable: this isn't just a cluster of odd trees. It's a living puzzle, a place where the ordinary rules of nature seem to unravel. and that's what keeps drawing the curious, the brave, and the skeptical into its shadowy embrace. The most straightforward explanation for the dancing forest's twisted trees comes down to two simple forces, wind and sand. Scientists who favor this theory point to the Curonian Spit's unique geography, a fragile ribbon of land battered by relentless Baltic winds. Here, gusts can reach speeds of over 60 miles per hour, strong enough to sculpt dunes into shifting waves. Over decades, these winds might push young saplings sideways, forcing their trunks to grow at unnatural angles as they struggle upward. The unstable sandy soil beneath them offers little anchor, causing roots to shift subtly over time. Like a potter shaping clay, the wind could bend these trees incrementally year after year until their forms become permanent. There's compelling evidence to support this idea. Botanists have documented similar twisted growth in other coastal forests where wind dominates the landscape. In Scotland's Shetland Islands, for example, dwarfed flag trees grow horizontally, their branches permanently swept to one side by ocean gales. But here's where the dancing forest defies expectations. Unlike typical wind-shaped trees which lean uniformly in the direction of prevailing winds, the Russian trees twist in loops, spirals, and even perfect rings. Some curve sharply at the base before shooting straight up, as if they changed their minds mid-growth. Others corkscrew so tightly that their trunks nearly knot themselves. This complexity suggests something beyond simple wind patterns at work. Then there's the soil mystery. The Curonian Spit sits atop an ancient system of migrating dunes with sand so fine it behaves almost like liquid. Researchers have found that the twisted trees often cluster in areas where the ground is unusually loose, their roots struggling to find stable footing. One theory suggests that as the dunes shift beneath them, the trees compensate by contorting their trunks to maintain balance. It's a survival tactic, like a tightrope walker adjusting posture in a stiff breeze. But if shifting sand alone caused the deformations, why don't all the trees in the area twist? Stand just 50 feet outside the dancing forest, and you'll find perfectly straight pines growing in identical soil. Critics of the wind and sand theory highlight another oddity. The trees' growth patterns don't align with historical weather data. Core samples from the twisted trunks reveal that many began bending during unusually calm decades, with no record of extreme storms. Even stranger, some spirals appear to rotate counter to the prevailing wind direction, like swimmers pushing against a current. This has led some researchers to propose a hidden variable. Perhaps the tree's DNA holds a quirk that makes them hypersensitive to even gentle breezes. But no genetic mutation has ever been found to explain such elaborate shapes. The wind and sand explanation, while logical, feels incomplete, like solving only one piece of a much larger puzzle. It accounts for the forest's location and some of its broader patterns, but not the precision of the twists or their eerie uniformity. If nature's hand is at work here, it's wielding tools we don't yet understand. And that leaves room for far stranger possibilities lurking just beneath the surface. But what if the answer lies not in the wind or the sand, but deep beneath the earth, where invisible forces pull at the roots of these trees like ghostly puppeteers? This is the heart of the geomagnetic anomaly theory, an idea that shifts the mystery from the visible world to the hidden currents of our planet. Researchers have long noted that the Curonian Spit sits atop a geological oddity, a pocket of unusual magnetic activity that doesn't match surrounding regions. Instruments dragged across the area pick up erratic fluctuations, spikes and dips in the Earth's magnetic field that seem to dance just as unpredictably as the trees themselves. Some scientists argue these magnetic disturbances could interfere with a tree's growth mechanisms. Trees, like all living things, respond to subtle environmental cues, including geomagnetism. Saplings use Earth's magnetic field to orient their growth, a phenomenon documented in studies where seedlings exposed to artificial magnetic fields grow in exaggerated curves. In the dancing forest, localized anomalies might scramble this natural guidance system, causing trunks to spiral as they literally lose their way. The most twisted trees often cluster in spots where magnetic readings go haywire, as if something underground is warping their sense of direction. Similar cases around the globe add weight to this theory. In Poland's Crooked Forest, another grove of mysteriously bent trees, researchers found abnormal magnetic readings beneath the most deformed trunks. Near Oregon's Vortex, an area famed for optical illusions and gravity-defying water flows, compasses spin erratically and nearby trees grow in uncanny spirals. Even more compelling are lab experiments where controlled magnetic fields induce stunted or twisted growth in plants, proving that magnetism can physically reshape living tissue. Yet skeptics raise tough questions. If geomagnetism is the culprit, why don't all trees in these anomalous zones twist? Why do some bends form perfect rings, a pattern far more precise than typical magnetic interference? And crucially, why hasn't anyone replicated the dancing forest's extreme shapes in controlled studies? The strongest magnetic fields used in experiments create subtle curves, not the dramatic corkscrews seen in Russia. This gap has led a minority of researchers to propose an even stranger possibility, that the anomalies aren't natural at all. Historical records reveal that Nazi scientists conducted secretive experiments on the Curonian Spit during World War II, including tests with powerful electromagnetic devices. Could buried machinery or forgotten experiments still emit distorted fields decades later? Or perhaps the answer lies further back, in ancient Baltic folklore that speaks of underground rivers of living iron, veins of ore said to pull at anything metal or anything alive. Science and myth rarely agree, but here they whisper the same unsettling question. What if the ground beneath the dancing forest remembers something the rest of the world has forgotten? The geomagnetic theory, like all others, leaves threads untied. It explains the clusters, the precision of some spirals, even the unease visitors report, but not the forest's full strangeness. Perhaps the truth isn't one force, but many: wind, sand, magnetism, and something still unmeasured, working in concert to create this living labyrinth. After all, nature rarely follows a single rule, especially in places where the earth itself seems to dream. Imagine a silent invasion, a microscopic war waged inside the very veins of these trees, where tiny organisms could be pulling the strings behind the forest's eerie choreography. Among the most compelling scientific explanations for the dancing forest's twisted forms is the idea of parasitic manipulation, where fungi or insects hijack a tree's growth to serve their own survival. It's a phenomenon seen elsewhere in nature, from zombie ants controlled by killer fungi to plants deformed by viral infections. Could something similar be happening here, turning these pines into unwilling participants in a biological puppet show? Take the case of the so-called witches' brooms, gnarled clusters of branches found in forests worldwide, caused by fungi like tafrina or mites that trick trees into growing dense, twisted shoots. In Japan's Yakushima Island, cedar trees grow in surreal spirals thanks to a fungus that alters their hormone balance. Closer to the Curonian Spit, Baltic forests have documented instances of Melampsora rust fungi warping young pines into stunted corkscrew shapes. These pathogens secrete chemicals that mimic the tree's natural auxins, growth hormones that dictate stem direction. By flooding the system with false signals, the invaders effectively steer the tree's development like a hacker rewriting code. But the dancing forest poses a challenge to this theory. Most parasite-induced deformations create chaotic, stunted growth, not the smooth, deliberate spirals seen here. And while fungal infections typically leave visible scars or discolorations, Russia's twisted trees show no outward signs of disease. Their bark is smooth, their needles vibrant green. That hasn't stopped researchers from hunting for hidden culprits. In 2018, a team from Kaliningrad State University drilled core samples from the most bizarre trunks, searching for microbial fingerprints. They found traces of fusarium, a fungus known to disrupt plant growth, but at levels no higher than in straight trees nearby. Then there's the insect angle. Some beetles and moths lay eggs inside tree bark, their larvae secreting enzymes that warp wood as they feed. The infamous pine pitch nodule moth, native to the Baltics, can cause localized bends, but nothing as dramatic as full trunk spirals. And crucially, these infestations usually kill their hosts within years, while the dancing forest trees live for decades, their twists accumulating slowly. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from a parallel mystery halfway across the world. In New Zealand's Slope Point forest, trees grow at near 90-degree angles, bent by Antarctic winds, except for one sheltered grove where trunks twist identically despite no wind exposure. There, scientists isolated a previously unknown soil bacterium that appears to alter root development. Could a similar microbe hide in the Curonian spit sandy soil, one that doesn't just bend trees but sculpts them with eerie precision? Yet even this leaves gaps. Why do infected trees, if that's what they are, cluster in specific zones while others nearby remain untouched? And why do the spirals often mirror each other as if following some silent rhythm? Parasites and fungi offer a tempting answer, but like the other theories, they only partly unravel the mystery. Maybe the truth isn't one villain but a conspiracy of forces, wind, microbes, and magnetism working in unison. Or perhaps, as the oldest locals murmur, the forest wasn't shaped by nature's accidents at all, but by something far more intentional. Long before scientists arrived with their instruments and theories, the people of the Curonian spit wove their own explanations for the dancing forest, stories steeped in whispers of the uncanny. One of the oldest tales tells of a sacred grove where pagan priests once performed rituals under a sky alive with swirling lights. According to local elders, the trees began bending not from wind or disease, but in response to the chants and drumbeats of long-forgotten ceremonies, their trunks forever frozen in mid-reverence. Some claim that if you press your ear against the twisted bark on a windless night, you can still hear echoes of those ancient songs hummed faintly through the wood. Then there's the legend of the cursed sand, a patch of earth said to have been scorched by a falling star centuries ago. Villagers warn that anyone who disturbs the soil beneath the most contorted trees risks unleashing a curse, one that twists not just trees but fates. Historical records from the 1800s mention a fisherman who dug near the grove to bury his net anchors. Within a year, his body warped into a painful, hunched posture, his spine mirroring the very trees he'd disregarded. Doctors called it a rare bone disease. His family swore it was the forest's revenge. In more recent decades, the folklore has taken a modern turn. During the Cold War, Soviet military patrols reported strange lights hovering above the grove, glowing orbs that darted between the trees like will-o'-the-wisps. One declassified report describes a soldier who vanished for 3 days after pursuing a light into the forest, only to reappear miles away with no memory of what happened. His boots, however, were filled with sand that glinted faintly blue under moonlight. UFO enthusiasts later latched onto these accounts, speculating that the tree's spirals are landing markers for extraterrestrial visitors, their shapes mimicking crop circles carved into living wood. Perhaps the most haunting story involves the dancing widow, a spectral figure said to wander the grove at dawn. Locals describe her as a woman in a tattered gown, her limbs bending at impossible angles as she sways between the trunks. According to the tale, she was a young bride who fled into the forest to escape an arranged marriage in the 1700s, only to vanish without a trace. Some claim she became one with the trees, her despair seeping into their roots and guiding their growth into mournful curves. To this day, visitors report catching glimpses of her, a flash of pale fabric between the pines or the sound of rustling leaves that mimics a stifled sob. These stories, whether born of superstition or something deeper, amplify the forest's enigma. Scientists may dismiss them as colorful distractions, but folklore often preserves truths that data can't capture. The sheer consistency of the tales across generations is striking. The recurring themes of bending, music, and lost souls suggest a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Even skeptics admit that standing among the twisted trunks stirs something primal, a sense that this place operates by rules we haven't yet named. After all, every legend begins with a kernel of observation, and in the dancing forest, reality has already defied expectation. What if the myths aren't just stories, but fractured memories of something that once happened here, something the trees themselves remember? The dancing forest is not alone in its defiance of nature's straight lines across the globe. Other woodlands whisper their own twisted secrets. Take Poland's Crooked Forest, a grove of 400 pines near Gryfino, each with a dramatic 90-degree bend at the base before shooting abruptly skyward. Like Russia's spiraling trees, these pines were planted in the 1930s, yet no one knows why or how they warped so uniformly. Local legends speak of Nazi tank experiments bending young trunks with ropes and pulleys, while scientists point to heavy snowfall or fungal infections. But unlike the dancing forest's chaotic loops, Poland's trees curve with eerie symmetry, all bending northward as if pulled by invisible strings. The precision suggests human intervention, yet no records or tool marks survive to prove it. Venture to New Zealand's Slope Point, where Antarctic winds sculpt trees into horizontal sculptures, their branches clawing inland like frozen waves. While wind explains much of the distortion here, a few sheltered groves twist identically without any wind exposure. Researchers found a soil bacterium altering root growth, a reminder that nature's tricks vary wildly by location. Then there's Tasmania's twisted trees of Mount Field, where snowfall weights young trunks, forcing them into serpentine curves as they mature. These examples share a key difference with the dancing forest. Their deformations follow clear environmental logic. Russia's spirals, by contrast, seem almost artistic, as if each tree chose its own contortion. The starkest parallel lies in Japan's Yakushima Island, where ancient cedars spiral skyward, their trunks ribboned by a fungus that manipulates growth hormones. Like the Curonian spit, these trees thrive in isolation, their distortions clustered in specific zones while others nearby grow straight. Yet Yakushima's cedars show visible signs of infection, blackened bark, stunted crowns, while Russia's twisted pines appear unnervingly healthy. Even more puzzling are the devil's corkscrews of Nebraska, fossilized tree roots that spiral underground in perfect helices. Paleobotanists once attributed these to prehistoric vines, but modern studies suggest they were shaped by rodent activity over millennia. If burrowing creatures could sculpt such precise forms, might underground forces, magnetic or otherwise, also guide the dancing forest's living sculptures? What unites these places isn't just the trees' shapes, but the gaps in our understanding. From Poland's regimented curves to Japan's fungal spirals, each forest resists a single neat explanation. The dancing forest stands apart not just for its visual drama, but for the way it gathers every theory, wind, microbes, magnetism, myth, and twists them into something new. Perhaps these groves are nature's way of reminding us that even in an age of satellites and gene sequencers, some mysteries still bend beyond our grasp. Visitors who step into the dancing forest often describe an immediate shift in the air, a hush so profound it feels like the trees themselves are holding their breath. Many report a tingling sensation along their skin, as if static electricity hangs invisibly among the twisted trunks. One hiker documented feeling an unseen hand press against their back while photographing a particularly gnarled pine, only to turn and find no one there. Others speak of whispers darting between the branches, voices too soft to decipher but too clear to dismiss as wind. These accounts aren't limited to nighttime. Even in broad daylight, people describe the unnerving sense of being watched by something just beyond the edge of vision. Some experiences defy conventional explanation entirely. A group of geology students visiting in 2019 swore they'd spent only 20 minutes sketching the trees, only to emerge and find their van's clock had jumped forward 3 hours, with no gaps in their memory or notes. Another traveler claimed their compass spun wildly near a cluster of ring-shaped trunks, then abruptly pointed due west, a direction that shouldn't have been possible given the forest's location. Even skeptical researchers admit to equipment malfunctions here. Cameras glitching, voice recorders capturing bursts of white noise, and drones losing GPS signals mid-flight over the most contorted sections. Then there are the stories that blur the line between perception and something stranger. A local guide recounts leading a tour past a famously twisted loop tree, only to have a child in the group gasp and point at the hollow center, insisting they'd seen a face blink back at them. Another visitor filmed what they thought was a trick of light, shadows that moved independently of the sun, weaving between trunks like fluid silhouettes. When played back, the footage showed no anomalies, yet everyone present swore they'd seen it. These inconsistencies fuel theories of localized time warps or electromagnetic interference playing tricks on both minds and machines. Not all encounters are visual. Many describe auditory phenomena, a chorus of faint clicks like wood contracting, except the sounds seem to answer each other in rhythmic patterns. One musician claimed the forest hummed in perfect a minor when the wind blew through certain trees, a tone they recorded and later found matched the resonant frequency of the nearby Baltic dunes. Others report sudden drops in temperature, cold spots that cling to patches of ground where the trees twist most violently, as if the energy required to bend them left permanent scars on the air itself. What makes these accounts so compelling is their consistency across decades. Soviet-era archives mention soldiers posted near the forest hearing choirs of whispers during night watches. Modern visitors, ranging from paranormal investigators to botanists, echo nearly identical details. Even those who enter as skeptics often leave unsettled, struggling to reconcile what they felt with what science can explain. The forest seems to resist being categorized, as if its true nature shifts depending on who walks beneath its branches. Perhaps that's why, despite the warnings and the goosebumps, people keep coming. Not just to see the trees, but to test the limits of their own perception against a place that refuses to follow the rules. During the Cold War's shadowy peak, the Curonian Spit wasn't just a natural wonder. It was a militarized zone sealed off by Soviet authorities under the guise of environmental protection. Locals recall convoys of unmarked trucks rumbling down sand-covered roads at night, heading toward the dancing forest. Declassified KGB files from the 1980s mention geophysical anomalies in the area, with one heavily redacted report noting unexpected vegetative distortions near a restricted research site. Experts who have pieced together these fragments suspect the military was testing something far stranger than wind patterns, possibly low-frequency electromagnetic fields, or even early attempts at weather manipulation. One clue lies in the work of Soviet scientist Igor Grabar, who in 1967 published a classified study on bioelectromagnetics, exploring how pulsed energy could alter plant growth. Though most of his research remains locked in archives, leaked notes describe pine seedlings exposed to oscillating fields developing spiral morphology identical to anomalous specimens. Could Grabar's team have been running field tests in the dancing forest? The timing aligns. Many twisted trees date back to the 1960s and 70s, when Soviet military science was obsessed with turning natural phenomena into weapons. Then there's the eerie testimony of a retired engineer named Dmitry Volkov, who worked at a nearby radar station. In a 2012 interview, he described metal pylons erected around the forest's periphery in 1974, humming with current. "We were told they were atmospheric sensors," Volkov claimed, but the trees started bending toward them like sunflowers to light. The pylons vanished after 3 years, leaving behind patches of sand fused into glass, a telltale sign of extreme heat. UFO researchers pounced on this as evidence of reverse-engineered alien tech, but military historians point to Project Woodpecker, a real Soviet program that used giant antennas to beam electromagnetic pulses over the horizon. Declassified NATO memos from that era note unexplained vegetative contortions in regions hit by these signals. The most chilling theory comes from Polish journalist Anna Kowalska, who uncovered blueprints in Baltic archives for something called Operation Krivoy Les, Russian for Crooked Forest. The documents, allegedly smuggled from a St. Petersburg bunker in 1993, outline an experiment to induce arboreal deflection via resonant frequency, essentially using sound waves to twist living trees into natural barricades against tank advances. The files mention test sites near Dune Sector Gamma, matching the dancing forest's coordinates. While skeptics dismiss the papers as Cold War disinformation, forestry experts note the twisted trees' density would indeed impede military vehicles, an unnervingly practical application for such surreal science. Yet for all these tantalizing leads, the full truth remains buried. The Russian government still restricts access to the forest's core, citing protected habitat rules. Satellite imagery reveals odd geometric clearings near the most twisted groves, but attempts to investigate them prompt swift visits from unmarked helicopters. Whether the Soviets weaponized the forest or merely studied its natural oddities, one thing's clear: the dancing forest didn't just captivate scientists and storytellers, it caught the attention of people with the power to turn mysteries into state secrets. And that raises the darkest question of all. If the military was involved, did they create the phenomenon, or were they trying to contain something they didn't understand? To understand the bizarre shapes of the dancing forest, we need to peel back the layers of how trees actually grow and what forces can hijack that process. At its core, a tree's shape is dictated by something called phototropism and gravitropism, two invisible systems working in tandem. Phototropism pulls the tree upward toward sunlight, while gravitropism keeps roots anchored downward, responding to Earth's gravity. These mechanisms rely on hormones called auxins, which redistribute themselves to control growth direction. When everything works as it should, you get a straight, skyward trunk. But the moment external forces interfere, those auxins can go haywire, and that's where the real weirdness begins. Wind is the most obvious disruptor. When gusts batter a sapling, mechanical stress triggers a survival response. The tree thickens its trunk on the windward side and elongates cells on the sheltered side, creating a permanent lean. This is why coastal trees often slant inland like frozen shadows of past storms. But the dancing forest spirals don't match this pattern. Wind-induced bends are usually gradual and unidirectional, not the sudden coils or 90-degree kinks seen here. That's led scientists to probe deeper into the tree's internal wiring, specifically how magnetic fields might scramble its growth signals. Studies show that plant cells contain cryptochromes, proteins sensitive to electromagnetic fields. In lab experiments, seedlings exposed to abnormal magnetism grow in exaggerated curves, their auxin pathways seemingly confused. If the Curonian spit's underground anomalies are emitting erratic fields, they could be overriding the tree's natural guidance systems, like a radio jammer disrupting a GPS signal. This might explain why some trunks twist in perfect helices, as if caught in an invisible vortex. But magnetism alone doesn't account for the forest's patchy distortions, why some trees warp wildly while neighbors stand straight. Then there's the soil's role. Sand isn't just unstable, it's nutritionally barren, forcing trees to stretch their roots farther for sustenance. In loose dunes, roots can shift subtly over time, causing micro-adjustments in the trunk's posture. Combine this with periodic sandstorms that bury parts of the trunk, and you get a stuttering growth pattern like a candle melting unevenly. Some researchers suggest the tree's lower sections get buried during storms, forcing new growth to emerge at odd angles before straightening. Yet core samples reveal no evidence of such burial in the most twisted trunks. The most intriguing possibility lies in epigenetics, the idea that stress can activate dormant genes. Drought, toxin exposure, or even viral infections can switch on ancient survival mechanisms coded into the tree's DNA. In the Baltics, Scots pines occasionally exhibit a rare mutation called fasciation, where stems flatten and spiral. Could the dancing forest trees be expressing some long-dormant trait, triggered by the Spit's unique cocktail of wind, magnetism, and poor soil? It's a compelling theory, but one that raises more questions. Why now? Why here? And why don't cloned saplings from these trees exhibit the same twists when planted elsewhere? The truth might lie in a combination of all these factors, a perfect storm of interference. Picture a young pine buffeted by wind, its roots struggling in shifting sand, while underground currents subtly warp its hormonal signals. Over decades, these competing forces could sculpt the trunk like clay on a potter's wheel. But until we find another place on Earth where trees twist so deliberately, the dancing forest remains a biological riddle, one that challenges our very understanding of how life adapts or is forced to adapt to its environment. The Curonian Spit isn't just defined by its wind or sand. It's a place where the very air seems to conspire with the land to create something extraordinary. This narrow strip of land has a microclimate so distinct, it's almost like stepping onto another planet. Temperatures here swing wildly, with winter frosts plunging to -20 degrees Celsius and summer heat waves baking the dunes at over 35. These extremes don't just stress the trees, they rewrite the rules of growth. Most plants respond to cold by slowing down, but the pines of the dancing forest face an added twist: the Baltic Sea's proximity. Even in deep winter, the water's residual warmth creates pockets of thawed air that collide with icy inland winds, causing sudden micro-thaws and refreezing. This erratic dance of freeze and thaw could be warping the tree's cellular structure, like a piece of metal bent repeatedly until it takes on a new shape. Then there's the rain or lack of it. The Spit receives barely 500 millimeters of precipitation annually, much of it arriving in violent summer downpours that erode the loose sand before vanishing into the ground. Trees here aren't just growing, they're constantly negotiating with thirst. Drought stress can trigger a survival mechanism called reaction wood, where trees reinforce their trunks with dense, fibrous tissue to compensate for instability. But this wood doesn't grow evenly. It forms in asymmetrical patches, pulling the trunk into curves and kinks as it hardens. In most forests, this results in subtle bends. Here, combined with the Spit's other oddities, it might explain the forest's dramatic spirals, but precipitation plays another, stranger role. The region's frequent sea mists carry salt, which settles on the tree's windward side. Salt inhibits growth on contact, creating a lopsided effect where one side of the trunk stalls while the other stretches upward. Over decades, this could force the trees into their signature twists. Salt also alters soil chemistry, making it harder for roots to absorb nutrients. Starved of steady nourishment, the trees might grow in fits and starts, their trunks recording each struggle in jagged increments. The most overlooked factor, light. The Spit's latitude means winter days are brutally short, with the sun skimming the horizon for mere hours. Trees desperate for sunlight often lean toward its path, but here the sun's angle changes dramatically between seasons. A sapling bending toward the low winter sun might find itself growing sideways by summer, creating a zigzag pattern over years. Add the forest's dense stands where trees compete fiercely for light, and you have a recipe for unnatural shapes. Yet even these explanations feel incomplete. Other places share similar climates without producing such bizarre trees. What makes the dancing forest unique is how all these factors converge. The salt and the drought, the light and the frost, each amplifying the other's effects. It's not just one force shaping these trees, but a chorus of them singing in a key we're only beginning to hear. And that might be the real secret. This forest isn't defying nature. It's revealing how chaotic nature can be when all its variables align just wrong or just right. The dancing forest doesn't just defy science, it ignites the imagination, becoming a living canvas for photographers and artists drawn to its otherworldly shapes. Step into any gallery near the Curonian Spit, and you'll find walls lined with images of those twisted trunks, each photographer framing the mystery through their own lens. Some shoot the trees at dawn, when low-hanging mist turns the grove into a monochrome dreamscape, the pines' contorted silhouettes stretching like ink blots against the fog. Others wait for winter, when fresh snow drapes over the spirals, turning them into frozen tornadoes mid-twist. The most haunting shots come from moonlight exposures, where long shutter speeds capture the trees seeming to sway, even on windless nights. Artists, too, can't resist the forest's pull. Local woodcarvers replicate the loops and knots in driftwood sculptures, polishing the grain until it glows like amber. Painters layer surreal blues and purples onto canvases, exaggerating the curves until the trees resemble Celtic knots or ancient runes. One particularly striking series, by Lithuanian artist Egil Ridderkate, overlays the forest's shadows with spectral human figures, their bodies mirroring the trees' bends as if they're merging with them. It's not just about the shapes, she explains. It's the feeling that these trees are holding stories in their rings, waiting for someone to listen. The forest's visual magnetism has even seeped into pop culture. A 2021 Polish horror film, The Bent Ones, used the dancing forest as its primary setting, with directors digitally enhancing the trees' twists to resemble grasping fingers. Video game designers have modeled eerie fantasy realms after its labyrinthine layout, most notably in the indie game Nascence E, where players navigate endless corridors inspired by the forest's unnatural geometry. Fashion designers, too, have taken cues from its forms. A 2019 Berlin Fashion Week collection featured dresses with spiraling wireframes that mimic the trees' silhouettes, the models moving like living extensions of the grove. Yet no artistic interpretation has ever fully captured the forest's unsettling presence. Photographs flatten its depth, missing the way the trunks seem to shift when viewed from different angles. Paintings can't replicate the electric prickle many visitors report feeling between their shoulder blades. Perhaps that's why creators keep returning, each trying and failing to pin down its essence. The dancing forest refuses to be contained, even on canvas or film. It exists most powerfully in the space between what we see and what we feel, a place where art doesn't explain the mystery but deepens it. The dancing forest has become more than a scientific oddity. It's a pilgrimage site for the curious, drawing thousands of visitors each year who come to walk among the twisted trunks and feel the eerie stillness for themselves. Local tour operators offer guided hikes through the grove, weaving together botany and folklore as they point out the most dramatic spirals. Souvenir shops sell postcards of the trees at golden hour, their shadows stretching like cursive script across the sand. But this surge in popularity comes at a cost. Foot traffic has compacted the fragile dune soil, and some visitors, desperate for a keepsake, have carved chunks of bark from the trees or snapped off smaller branches. The very mystery that attracts people threatens to unravel the forest's delicate balance. To protect the trees, Russian authorities declared the core grove a protected zone in 2015, installing raised boardwalks to keep feet off the sensitive root systems. Guards now patrol the area, finding anyone who strays off the path or touches the trunks. Scientists have also stepped in, fencing off the most vulnerable specimens with nearly invisible mesh barriers that let air and light through but block human contact. These measures haven't been universally welcomed. Some longtime residents argue the restrictions sterilize the forest's wildness, turning a place of wonder into a museum exhibit. "You used to feel the trees breathe," one local fisherman laments. "Now they're behind ropes like prisoners." The debate hinges on a deeper question: how do you preserve a phenomenon that might rely on its very instability? Unlike ancient redwoods or coral reefs, the dancing forest's magic lies in its distortions, the way wind, sand, and maybe something unseen keep reshaping it. Lock it away too tightly, and you risk halting the natural processes that make it extraordinary. One proposed compromise involves managed exposure, limiting daily visitor numbers but allowing small groups to enter the core zone with researchers, collecting data while satisfying curiosity. Early trials show promised tourists leave feeling like participants in discovery rather than passive observers. Technology offers another solution. Drones equipped with thermal cameras now map the forest monthly, tracking subtle changes in the tree's health without disturbing them. Virtual reality stations in nearby visitor centers let people walk among the trees digitally, complete with augmented reality overlays explaining each twist's possible causes. For those who crave a tangible connection, artists craft resin casts of fallen bark and branches, sold as souvenirs that don't harm living trees. Even the act of photography is being rethought. Visitors are encouraged to upload their shots to a crowdsourced database where AI compares new images with old ones, spotting minute shifts in the tree's forms over time. The forest's fame has also sparked an unexpected economic revival in the region. Once sleepy villages now host boutique hotels shaped like curling pine cones, their walls etched with laser-cut patterns mimicking the tree's rings. Cafes serve dancing forest herbal teas blended from local plants, while night tours FEATURE Chinese letter light shows that cast the trunk's shadows rippling across the dunes like a living zoetrope. Some worry this commercialism cheapens the mystery, but others see it as a way to fund conservation. Every tea sold supports reforestation efforts, and hotel taxes directly fund the patrols keeping the trees safe. Perhaps the most poignant conservation story involves the forest's next generation. Botanists have collected seeds from the twisted trees, growing saplings in controlled nurseries. None exhibit the wild contortions of their parents, proof that the magic lies in the place, not just the DNA. These straight-back descendants may one day be planted as a buffer zone, shielding the original grove while still carrying its legacy forward. It's a bittersweet solution. Preserving the mystery means accepting that some truths stay rooted where they are, unwilling to be transplanted. Striking the right balance between access and preservation isn't just about boardwalks or drones, it's about redefining what it means to experience wonder. The dancing forest challenges us to admire without possessing, to question without demanding answers. In a world obsessed with conquest and extraction, this twisted grove stands as a reminder that some mysteries thrive precisely because they remain out of reach, bending but never breaking under the weight of our curiosity. Among the swirling theories about the dancing forest, some have taken root in popular imagination despite withering under scientific scrutiny. Take the persistent notion that extraterrestrial visitors sculpted the trees, a theory fueled by Cold War-era UFO sightings and the forest's proximity to former Soviet military sites. While it's true that the region saw strange lights in the sky during the 1960s, astronomers point out that the Curonian spit's unique atmospheric conditions can distort celestial phenomena. Ball lightning, a rare but documented weather event, often glides low to the ground, mimicking the darting orbs witnesses described. As for the trees themselves, astrophysicists note that no known energy beam or technology, human or otherwise, could selectively warp living wood without leaving burn marks or radiation traces. Core samples from the most twisted trunks show no isotopic anomalies, just the same carbon signatures found in ordinary pines. Then there's the legend of an ancient Baltic curse, whispered to twist anyone or anything that disturbs the sacred ground. Folklorists trace this myth to pre-Christian traditions where spirals symbolized portals to the spirit world. But historians highlight a more pragmatic origin. Medieval fishermen likely spread such stories to deter rivals from raiding their prime net mending spots along the spit. Modern soil analysis further debunks the curse theory. Ground-penetrating radar reveals no buried artifacts or mass graves beneath the grove, just layers of sterile sand. If some malevolent force lurked here, you'd expect it to leave more tangible evidence than oddly shaped trees and goosebumps. Another widespread myth blames the distortions on secret Nazi experiments, citing declassified documents about wartime botanical research. True, German scientists did study plant growth manipulation in the 1940s, hoping to create natural camouflage for bunkers. However, forestry records show the dancing forest's oldest twisted pines predate World War II by decades. Dendrochronology places some trunks' initial bends as early as 1908, long before the Third Reich's rise. The spiral patterns also lack the uniformity you'd expect from mechanical shaping. No telltale rope marks or tool grooves mar the bark. Perhaps the most poetic but least plausible theory involves singing sands, the phenomenon where certain dunes emit musical hums when wind shifts their grains. Proponents claim these vibrations guided the tree's growth like a natural tuning fork. Acoustic biologists counter that while sand harmonics do exist, their frequencies measure around 50 Hz, far too low to influence plant cells. Experiments exposing saplings to continuous 50 Hz tones produced no abnormal bending. Even if the sands sang louder centuries ago, physics dictates sound waves dissipate too quickly in open air to sculpt living wood with such precision. What these myths share is a desire for narrative neatness, a single, sensational cause for the forest's strangeness. Science, however, deals in messy probabilities. The truth likely lies in a confluence of mundane yet extraordinary factors. A genetically susceptible tree species, unstable soil, extreme microclimates, and perhaps those elusive magnetic quirks. Dismissing alien architects or cursed soil isn't robbing the forest of wonder. It's redirecting our awe toward nature's ability to create marvels without magic. After all, a world where wind, sand, and biology conspire to bend reality is far more thrilling than any fiction. The oldest known reference to the dancing forest appears in an 1884 surveyor's map of the Curonian Spit, where a patch of land is labeled Krummer Wald, German for crooked wood. But dig deeper into Baltic archives and you'll find far older clues. A 17th century merchant's diary preserved in Klaipėda's Maritime Museum describes encountering pines that writhe like serpents while traversing the Spit's dunes. The account mentions local fishermen using the twisted trunks as navigational markers, their bizarre shapes visible from the lagoon when fog obscured normal landmarks. Even more intriguing is a faded parchment from 1592, part of a Lithuanian duke's hunting log, that warns riders to avoid a devil's copse where horses reared and compasses spun. The described location matches the modern forest's coordinates with chilling accuracy. These early accounts suggest the tree's contortions aren't a recent development. In fact, dendrochronology, the science of dating tree rings, reveals some twisted pines began bending over 300 years ago. Core samples taken in 2019 show telltale compression marks in the wood's early growth layers, indicating the distortion started when these trees were mere saplings. One particularly gnarled specimen, nicknamed the Ouroboros for its looped trunk, shows rings that curve sharply beginning around 1710. That predates not only modern theories of geomagnetism or military experiments, but even widespread human settlement on the Spit. The most compelling historical evidence comes from an unlikely source: naval records. Baltic ship captains between 1750 and 1820 often annotated their charts with peculiar shoreline features to aid navigation. Multiple maps in Tallinn's Maritime Archive depict a cluster of squiggly tree symbols near the Spit's narrowest point, a cartographic convention indicating unnatural vegetation formations. One 1812 Danish chart labels the area Dansen Træer, or dancing trees, proving the forest's eerie reputation predates modern tourism by centuries. Yet not all historical mentions treat the phenomenon as ominous. An 1868 ethnography of Baltic fishing villages includes charming folktales of the singing forest, where bent trees supposedly echoed with the voices of drowned sailors. Elderly informants described hanging copper bells from the twisted branches to amplify these ghostly harmonies, a tradition that abruptly stopped in the late 19th century, though no one recalled why. Even Soviet scientific bulletins from the 1950s, typically dry and technical, betray unease. One botanist's field notes confess feeling observed by the grove's unnatural geometry, while a 1962 aerial survey report circles the forest in red pencil, scribbling, "Avoid low-altitude passes," beside unexplained static interference marks on the accompanying photographs. What emerges from these fragments is a pattern of persistent mystery. Whether documented by medieval nobles or communist scientists, the dancing forest has defied explanation across eras, its distortions seemingly immune to the march of human understanding. The trees twist just as sharply in yellowed sketches as they do in high-resolution satellite images, a continuity that chills more than any fleeting ghost story. If modern tools and centuries of record still leave us grasping at theories, perhaps some truths grow sideways like these very pines, refusing to conform to the straight lines of our logic. Geological surveys of the Curonian Spit reveal a subsurface world as peculiar as the twisted trees above. Core samples extracted from the dancing forest show a stark contrast to surrounding areas, while typical Baltic dune soil consists of uniform fine sand down to 3 meters. The twisted grove sits atop a chaotic mix of compacted clay lenses and loose sediment pockets. These erratic layers create what hydrologists call a perched aquifer, where rainwater gets trapped between impermeable clay plates, saturating only certain root zones while leaving others parched. Imagine a tree drinking from a shattered cup, its roots forced to grow asymmetrically in search of uneven moisture. This could explain why some trunks kink abruptly at the base, as if their lower halves grew drunk on sporadic water access while their tops stretched soberly toward the sun. Ground-penetrating radar maps unveil even stranger patterns. Beneath the most contorted trees, scans show narrow channels of sand that spiral downward like inverted tornadoes, features typically seen in earthquake-prone regions where liquefaction occurs. Yet the Curonian Spit has negligible seismic activity. One theory suggests these vortices formed during the Little Ice Age, when frozen groundwater expanded and contracted violently, churning the soil into whirlpool-like formations. Trees rooting into these zones might have experienced subtle, persistent torque as their roots followed the spiraling substrate. Supporting this, dendrochronology reveals that several extreme twists correlate with harsh winters between 1790 and 1830, when temperature swings exceeded 30 degrees Celsius within days. Then there's the mystery of the magnetic sand. In 2018, geologists from the University of Gdansk discovered microscopic magnetite crystals concentrated in soil near the forest's looped trees, minerals usually found near meteorite impacts or volcanic vents, neither of which exist here. Lab tests showed these particles align along invisible field lines when wet, creating microscopic torque that could theoretically nudge growing root tips. While the effect is minuscule, over decades it might introduce enough directional bias to warp trunks like hands on a clock face slowly twisting. Stranger still, the magnetite appears fresher than the surrounding soil, suggesting it's being replenished by some ongoing process, possibly groundwater dissolving iron from deeper layers and precipitating it near the surface. Water itself behaves oddly here. Thermal imaging shows underground streams that vanish abruptly beneath certain trees, only to reappear 50 meters away. Chemical tracers revealed these are not typical groundwater flows but preferential pathways, tunnels carved by acidic root exudates dissolving carbonates in the sand. Normally such channels form straight lines, but in the dancing forest they zigzag erratically, possibly reflecting the tree's own confused growth signals. The most startling discovery came from isotope analysis showing that water sampled near twisted trunks contains elevated levels of deuterium, a heavy hydrogen variant associated with prolonged exposure to electromagnetic fields. This aligns with the geomagnetic anomaly theory, but adds a new twist: the water itself might be retaining some imprint of those forces, effectively remembering exposures that occurred years earlier. All these findings paint a portrait of a landscape fundamentally unlike its surroundings, a place where soil, water, and minerals interact in ways that defy textbook models. Yet the most perplexing detail comes from deep core samples. At depths between 8 and 12 meters, engineers hit a layer of glassy, fused sand resembling fulgurite, the tubular formations lightning creates when it strikes sand. But this layer spans nearly the entire grove, far too extensive for any single lightning strike. The leading hypothesis involves piezoelectric effects, where pressure from migrating dunes could generate localized electrical discharges over centuries. If true, this would mean the trees are rooted in what was once, for brief instants, a subterranean storm of electricity, a hidden cataclysm whose ghost still lingers in every twisted trunk. Could human hands, intentional or not, be partly responsible for the dancing forest's unnatural curves? While nature often takes the spotlight in this mystery, the possibility of human interference lingers like a shadow between the twisted trunks. The Curonian Spit's history is far from untouched wilderness. Centuries of logging, military activity, and even industrial accidents have left their mark. Soviet-era documents reveal that the area near the grove was once a storage site for agricultural chemicals in the 1950s. Leaked barrels of defoliants designed to stunt plant growth could have soaked into the groundwater, altering the tree's development in unpredictable ways. Farmers in other regions have reported similar deformities in orchards after herbicide exposure, gnarled branches and coiled trunks eerily reminiscent of the pines here. Yet no soil tests have ever detected persistent toxins in the forest, leaving this theory floating like a specter without proof. Then there's the legacy of human reshaping of the land itself. The Spitz dunes were notoriously unstable until the 19th century, when Prussian engineers planted vast swaths of Scotch pine to anchor the shifting sand. Could the dancing forest be a rogue patch of trees that reacted differently to this forced stabilization? Historical forestry records show that some saplings were treated with an experimental resin-based adhesive to help roots bind to the loose substrate. A botched application might have constricted growth in uneven ways, like a corset tightening around the trunks as they expanded. But why would this affect only one small grove, and why would the distortions persist generations after the treatment's effect should have faded? The most unsettling human connection comes from Cold War experiments. Declassified East German files mention a 1968 project called Waldbegung, forest bending, where scientists tested low-frequency sound waves on young trees to create natural barriers against enemy vehicles. Witnesses described metallic pylons emitting a subsonic hum near the dancing forest's periphery in the 1970s, though no official records confirm their purpose. Acoustics experts note that certain frequencies can disrupt auxin transport in plants, the same hormones that guide straight growth. If such experiments occurred here, even briefly, they might have left behind a silent, lingering distortion in the tree's cellular memory. Yet for all these tantalizing leads, the human intervention theory stumbles on one stubborn fact. The oldest twisted pines predate modern chemistry and acoustic science by centuries. Core samples reveal some began bending before the Industrial Revolution, when the Spit's only visitors were fishermen and amber traders. Unless some forgotten Baltic alchemist stumbled upon tree-twisting techniques lost to time, humanity's role in this mystery remains as tangled as the forest's own roots. Perhaps the truth isn't nature versus human influence, but an unnerving collaboration where our actions accidentally amplified a phenomenon already waiting in the land itself. For those who sense something beyond wind or magnetism at work in the dancing forest, the answers might lie not in soil samples, but in the unseen energies that believers say crisscross our planet. New Age practitioners and geomancers describe this stretch of the Curonian spit as a convergence point for ley lines, hypothetical channels of Earth energy said to connect ancient sacred sites worldwide. Dowsers who have visited the grove report their rods spinning wildly over certain spots, tracing patterns that mirror the tree's twists. One Reiki master mapped what she called a double helix vortex swirling through the forest's core, claiming the energy there vibrates at a frequency that physically warps living matter. Skeptics dismiss such readings as subjective, but fascinatingly, independent electromagnetic surveys have detected erratic pulses in these exact locations, fluctuations that vanish just steps outside the twisted grove. The forest's spiral shapes take on new meaning through an esoteric lens. Sacred geometry traditions view the spiral as a universal symbol of growth and transformation, seen in everything from galaxies to DNA. Some intuitives suggest the trees are literally recording energy patterns in their wood, their growth rings acting like vinyl grooves etched with vibrations humans can't perceive. This idea finds eerie echoes in the work of late Swiss researcher Hans Jenny, who photographed how sound waves shape sand into intricate spirals, patterns startlingly similar to the tree's bends. If specific frequencies can sculpt inanimate particles, could the forest be responding to some inaudible hum rising from the earth? Then there's the shamanic perspective. Baltic pagan traditions have long held that certain trees serve as bridges between worlds, their roots tapping into what they called vedutakai, or wind roads, invisible pathways where spirits travel. Contemporary shamans who have conducted rituals in the forest describe feeling the ground breathe beneath them, with the most twisted trunks allegedly marking portals where these energies surface. One Lithuanian practitioner recounted how her drum's pitch inexplicably rose when played near a ring-shaped tree, as if the air itself resisted the sound. Others speak of vivid visions when touching the bark, flashes of dancing figures, or a sensation of being gently tugged downward, as if the trees remember being something else long ago. The most provocative theory comes from researchers studying plant consciousness. Experiments like those of Monica Gagliano suggest plants may possess a form of memory and decision-making. Applied to the dancing forest, this raises a haunting question. What if the trees are responding not just to external forces, but to some collective awareness of their own? Could generations of human fascination, our stories, our rituals, our sheer focus on their oddity have subtly shaped their growth through a feedback loop we don't yet understand? It's a notion that blurs the line between observer and observed, where the act of witnessing becomes part of the mystery itself. Whether you view these ideas as profound truths or poetic metaphors, they share a common thread: the sense that this forest operates on a level beyond physical laws. Science measures the bend of a trunk. Spirituality asks why that bend feels alive. Perhaps both are chasing different fragments of the same enigma, like visitors circling the same twisted tree, each convinced they've found the true shape only to realize it changes with every step. The dancing forest refuses to be just one thing, and in that refusal, it becomes a mirror for our own endless seeking. The dancing forest doesn't just unsettle human visitors. Local wildlife seems to respond to its distortions with behaviors just as puzzling as the twisted trunks themselves. Biologists studying the area have documented birds that avoid nesting in the most contorted trees, even when their usual nesting species thrive in the surrounding straight pines. Ornithologists initially assumed the bends made the trunks unstable, but motion sensor cameras revealed something stranger. Birds would land on the twisted branches, only to take off moments later as if startled. One study noted that robins and chaffinches, species typically unfazed by odd shapes, refused to linger on the spiraled sections, preferring nearby normal trees even when food was placed on the deformed limbs. It's as if the trees emit some signal imperceptible to humans but jarring to avian senses. The phenomenon extends to mammals too. Trail cameras set up by researchers from Kaliningrad State University captured deer and foxes skirting the densest clusters of twisted trunks, creating worn paths that curve around the grove rather than cutting through it. One striking sequence shows a young fox approaching a loop-shaped tree, sniffing the air, then backtracking with its fur bristled, a reaction normally reserved for predator encounters. Thermal imaging revealed these animals' heart rates spike slightly when near the most deformed trees, though no visible threat exists. Even insects display odd preferences. Honeybees from hives a kilometer away consistently bypass the twisting pines when foraging, despite their abundant pollen. But the real shock came when botanists examined the forest floor. The understory plants beneath the warped trees grow in patterns that mirror the distortions above. Ferns curl at their tips, moss forms spiral colonies, and even grass blades lean in coordinated swirls. Soil tests ruled out nutrient imbalances, leaving researchers to wonder if the trees somehow imprint their shape on the ecosystem around them. The most compelling evidence comes from a controlled experiment where scientists transplanted straight-grown seedlings into the grove. Within 2 years, the new trees began developing slight but measurable bends, while control groups planted just outside the forest grew normally. This ripple effect raises a haunting question. Is the forest's influence spreading? Satellite imagery from the past 20 years shows the twisted zone expanding slowly but steadily, with newly deformed trees appearing at the edges like a stain soaking into paper. If whatever warps these pines can jump species or worse, accelerate, it could reshape the entire spit's ecology. Yet amid these disruptions, one creature thrives, the rare Baltic glowworm which clusters in the grove's twisted bark. Their bioluminescence pulses brighter here than anywhere else in the region, as if feeding off the same energy that bends the trees. Nature, it seems, always finds a way to dance along, even when the rhythm defies all logic. In the search for answers, scientists have turned to time tracking the dancing forest trees year after year to catch their distortions in the act. High-resolution time-lapse photography, set up over a decade ago, reveals that the bending isn't steady. Instead, the trees warp in sudden, almost violent spurts, often during brief windows in early spring. One striking sequence shows a young pine remaining straight for 3 years, then twisting nearly 15 degrees in a matter of weeks. The footage captures invisible forces at work, bark stretching like taffy, branches recoiling as if pressed by giant hands. These growth bursts align with periods of rapid thaw, when frozen groundwater melts abruptly, suggesting the trees might be literally wrenched sideways by the shifting earth beneath them. Core samples tell an even stranger story. Dendrochronologists examining the rings of the most twisted trunks found alternating bands of dense and light wood, evidence of extreme growth stress. In normal trees, such patterns appear only after trauma like lightning strikes or avalanches. Here, they occur rhythmically every 7 to 9 years, as if the forest endures recurring upheavals only it consents. Some rings show microscopic fractures where the trunk's fibers twisted too quickly, leaving scars like silent screams in the wood. Even more puzzling, the direction of the spirals often reverses mid-growth. A tree might coil clockwise for a decade, then abruptly switch, its new layers spiraling the opposite way. No known natural force explains this back and forth dance, leaving researchers to wonder if the trees are responding to competing influences, say, magnetic fields battling underground currents. Botanists have also documented eerie synchronicity. In 2019, a cluster of 12 trees scattered across the grove all developed identical 34-degree bends within the same 6-month period, despite varying ages and locations. Soil monitors recorded nothing unusual, no tremors, no chemical leaks. The only shared condition was an abnormally still autumn, with wind speeds dropping to near zero for weeks. This contradicts the prevailing wind theory, suggesting the trees might twist without external pressure, as if obeying some unseen timer. The most revealing data comes from sap flow sensors. Normally, tree sap moves predictably, following daily temperature cycles. In the dancing forest, however, the most contorted trunks show erratic pulses, with sap sometimes reversing direction midday. These disruptions spike during geomagnetic storms, hinting at a bizarre link between solar activity and the tree's internal rhythms. One audacious experiment tried replicating these conditions in a lab, subjecting saplings to artificial magnetic pulses. The results were unsettling. The trees grew in jagged zigzags, but their twists lacked the forest's eerie elegance. It's as if the real secret lies not in any single force, but in the Curonian spit's unique cocktail of soil, energy, and time, a recipe we've yet to crack. What emerges from these studies isn't just a growth pattern, but a living paradox. These trees don't bend passively, they react, contorting with purpose we can't yet decipher. Every spiral seems less like an accident and more like a response, as if the forest is whispering its secrets in a language written in wood and wind. The dancing forest has transcended its physical roots to become a cultural icon, its twisted forms echoing through documentaries, novels, and films that amplify its enigmatic allure. One of the earliest mainstream appearances came in 2007, when the BBC's Natural World series devoted an entire episode to the grove, framing it as Earth's most inexplicable garden. The production team used thermal drones to capture the tree's heat signatures at night, revealing an odd pattern. The most contorted trunks retained warmth longer than their straight counterparts, as if holding onto sunlight like a secret. This visual paradox captivated audiences, sparking a wave of speculative science shows from mysteries of the abandoned to ancient aliens, each offering their own spin on the mystery. Literature, too, has woven the forest into its fabric. Lithuanian author Rūta Šepetytės' best-selling historical novel Shadows of the Amber Coast features the grove as a liminal space where characters confront their pasts, its trees mirroring their emotional twists. More strikingly, Japanese surrealist Haruki Murakami referenced the forest in a 2014 interview, calling it a real place manifestation of the unconscious, a comparison that inspired his short story The Wind-Up Bird and the Tuesday Trees. Even children's books have embraced the enigma. German illustrator Rotraut Susanne Berner's The Curved Wood transforms the trees into whimsical characters who dance only when no one watches, blending folklore with ecological wonder. Cinema has perhaps most dramatically amplified the forest's eerie reputation. The 2016 Polish horror film The Bent Ones used practical effects to exaggerate the tree's curves, filming actors being slowly pulled into the bark by sinewy, vine-like tendrils. While panned by critics for its over-the-top plot, the movie's haunting visuals, particularly a scene where moonlight reveals the grove's shadows forming a spiraled glyph on the sand, went viral, cementing the forest's status as a digital age myth. More nuanced portrayals emerged in documentaries like The Living Labyrinth, where scientists and shamans debated the grove's meaning over stunning time-lapse footage of trunks creaking into new shapes. Even video games and music have drawn from the forest's uncanny energy. The indie puzzle game Nascence E modeled its dreamlike corridors after the tree's geometry, players navigating mazes that warp in real time. Meanwhile, Icelandic composer Ólafur Arnalds sampled wind recordings from the grove for his album Remember, layering the creaks of bending wood into ambient tracks that pulse with organic unease. These creative interpretations haven't just popularized the mystery, they've expanded it, adding layers of artistic license that blur the line between observed phenomenon and collective imagination. Perhaps most telling is how the forest's global fame has looped back to shape local identity. Kaliningrad's annual Dancing Forest Festival now attracts thousands, featuring sculptors carving replicas of the twisted trunks and storytellers reimagining the legends for new generations. A 2021 survey found that 60% of regional tourism cites media portrayals as their reason for visiting, a proof that the mystery no longer belongs solely to the trees, but to everyone who's seen them through a screen or page. This cultural feedback loop raises a provocative question. As the forest's legend grows, is it changing how we see the trees, or are the trees changing how we see the world? Botanists armed with core samples and spectrometers see the dancing forest as a thrilling biological puzzle, not a supernatural spectacle. Dr. Elena Kovaleva, a dendrologist from St. Petersburg University, spent 3 years mapping the trees' growth patterns and found eerie consistencies. The most twisted trunks often cluster where underground water flows intersect at sharp angles. These trees aren't dancing, she insists. They're screaming in slow motion, their cells warping under pressures we're only starting to measure. Her team's experiments show that saplings grown from the forest seeds in controlled greenhouses remain straight, proving the distortion requires the spit's unique environmental cocktail. Yet even she admits the data has gaps. Why do some bends form perfect mathematical spirals? That's the question keeping me awake. Paranormal researchers, meanwhile, hear a different kind of whisper in the grove. Sergei Petrov, a former physicist turned paranormal investigator, points to electromagnetic anomalies his devices detect near the most contorted trees, fluctuations that spike at night or during specific lunar phases. You can't dismiss what instruments record, he argues, showing graphs of erratic energy pulses that align with visitor reports of unease. His thermal cameras have captured cold spots hovering near the trunks like ghostly halos, while audio equipment picks up infrasound waves at frequencies known to induce dizziness in humans. Science calls it unexplained. I call it a dialogue with whatever intelligence shaped this place. The debate turns especially heated over the tree's alleged healing properties. Local folklore claims resting against certain twisted trunks can cure back pain, anecdotes some paranormal teams attribute to earth energy vortices. But botanists like Dr. Kovaleva counter with biomechanics. The unique angles might temporarily relieve spinal pressure by altering posture. At a 2019 symposium, the two camps clashed openly when Petrov presented soil samples with unexplained crystalline structures. Geological contaminants, snapped a geochemist in the audience, only for Petrov to fire back. Or technology we don't recognize. The tension underscores a deeper divide, whether to frame the forest's mysteries as solvable equations or unknowable wonders. Even their methodologies diverge dramatically. Scientists rely on repeatable experiments like the team from Krakow who injected fluorescent dyes into tree veins to track nutrient flow, revealing kinks where auxin hormones bottleneck. Paranormal researchers, conversely, chase ephemeral phenomena. One group from Latvia's Esoteric Society documented orbs of light circling the grove during a new moon, footage mainstream scientists dismissed as lens flares. Yet both sides share one common ground: frustration with the forest's refusal to fit neatly into any framework. As Kovaleva concedes while adjusting her spectrometers, the data never lies, but sometimes it tells stories we're not equipped to hear. What makes this clash so compelling isn't just the disagreement, but the sliver of overlap where both perspectives falter. When Petrov's electromagnetic readings match Kovaleva's maps of distorted growth rings, or when her soil analyses confirm his claims of unusual mineral deposits, the forest seems to smirk at human categories. Perhaps the truth isn't about choosing between science and the supernatural, but recognizing that some places exist where the boundary itself bends. After all, the trees don't care what we call them, they just keep twisting toward their own strange light. Despite decades of study, the dancing forest clings stubbornly to its secrets, leaving researchers with more questions than answers. One of the most baffling mysteries is the precise timing of the distortions. Why do some trees begin twisting only after decades of normal growth, while others spiral from the moment they sprout? Botanists at Kaliningrad's Immanuel Kant University are now using AI to analyze growth ring patterns across hundreds of core samples, hunting for hidden triggers. Early findings suggest a possible link to solar cycles, with twisting episodes clustering around periods of heightened sunspot activity. But this raises another puzzle. If solar flares are warping the trees via electromagnetic disturbances, why don't other forests near the same latitude show similar effects? Then there's the enigma of the silent witnesses, straight trees standing unscathed mere feet from their grotesquely twisted neighbors. Soil composition tests show no discernible differences between these microzones, yet something invisible partitions the forest into affected and untouched patches. A team from Estonia's Tartu Observatory recently deployed ground-penetrating radar with shocking results. Beneath the twisted grove, they detected a network of narrow, winding cavities, natural pipes in the sandstone that channel groundwater in erratic paths. These tunnels echo the trees' above-ground spirals with uncanny precision, hinting at some subterranean mirroring effect. But how could water flowing underground sculpt wood so precisely overhead? The leading theory involves piezoelectricity, where pressure from shifting dunes generates faint electrical currents in the quartz-rich sand, potentially interfering with the tree's growth hormones. Perhaps the most haunting question is whether the forest's distortions are spreading. Satellite imagery analyzed by the German Aerospace Center reveals the twisted zone has expanded approximately 5 meters per decade since the 1950s. Is this due to changing climate patterns, altering wind and soil dynamics, or is some unseen force slowly gaining strength? To find out, Polish ecologists have embedded microchips into hundreds of saplings at the forest's edge, monitoring their growth in real time. The data reveals something unsettling. Trees don't gradually bend, they remain straight for years before suddenly warping in abrupt, almost violent adjustments. One young pine remained perfectly vertical for 8 years, then developed a 15-degree kink in just 3 months without any apparent environmental trigger. Cutting-edge technology is finally providing tools to probe these riddles. Researchers from MIT's Media Lab have developed phytosensors, flexible electronic skins wrapped around tree trunks that measure nanoscale movements and internal stresses. These sensors captured something extraordinary during a calm night in 2022. Clusters of trees simultaneously vibrating at frequencies too low for human detection, their trunks subtly pulsing in sync like a slow, arboreal heartbeat. Meanwhile, quantum biologists are testing whether the forest's unique conditions might enable something called bioentanglement, where trees share growth information through quantum-level processes in their root systems. It's a controversial idea, but preliminary experiments show that when saplings from the grove are separated, changes applied to one occasionally manifest in its partner, even when shielded from all known communication methods. The ultimate question remains whether these phenomena are unique to this sliver of land. A recent discovery in Chile's Atacama Desert, where a handful of quinoa trees grow in identical spirals, suggests the dancing forest might not be alone. Teams are now comparing soil samples and magnetic readings across these sites, searching for a common thread. What they're finding challenges fundamental assumptions. In both locations, the most twisted trees flourish where natural radiation levels dip slightly below background averages, as if something is subtly shielding them. This unexpected correlation has reignited debates about whether cosmic rays or deep Earth energy flows could play a role in shaping living wood. As drones map the forest in millimeter detail and spectrometers analyze the molecular quirks of its bark, one truth becomes clear. Every answered question unveils 3 new mysteries. The dancing forest refuses to be catalogued or solved. It evolves faster than our tools can track, a living reminder that some wonders resist quantification. Perhaps the most valuable research isn't about finding definitive answers, but learning how to ask better questions of a world still capable of astonishing us. After all, the moment we stop being perplexed by places like this is the moment we stop truly seeing them. Now it's your turn to step into the mystery. What do you think causes the dancing forest's eerie twists? Over the years, we've heard countless theories from viewers just like you, each one adding a new layer to this enigma. One commenter swore they'd seen identical spirals in a forest near their hometown in Norway, where locals blamed a buried Viking runestone humming with old magic. Another shared drone footage from Chile's Atacama Desert, where a handful of trees coil in near-identical loops despite being thousands of miles away. Could these distant groves be whispering the same secret? Some of the most compelling ideas come from those who have stood beneath the twisted trunks themselves. A geologist visiting from Canada described feeling her compass needle spin wildly near a ring-shaped tree, only to settle pointing due west, a direction that made no sense given the forest's location. A musician insisted the grove's creaks and groans formed a minor chord when the wind blew just right, something they captured on tape during a quiet dawn expedition. And then there are the stories that defy categorization, like the viewer who claimed their photos of the trees showed shadowy figures between the trunks, figures that vanished when they tried to zoom in. Maybe you've encountered something similar closer to home. A glade where the trees lean the wrong way, a park where your dog refuses to walk past a certain oak, or even a houseplant that grows in uncanny spirals despite every effort to straighten it. Nature is full of these quiet rebellions, places where the rules seem to bend. That's what makes the dancing forest so fascinating. It's not just a Russian oddity, but a mirror held up to the strangeness lurking in plain sight everywhere. So hit pause and tell us, what's your take? Do the trees twist from hidden faults in the earth or something even deeper? Have you ever stumbled upon a place that felt off, like it was playing by its own rules? Drop your theories in the comments. We read every single one, and who knows, the next big clue might just come from you. After all, mysteries like this aren't solved by experts alone. Sometimes it takes a chorus of voices, each noticing the details others miss, to unravel the truth hiding in the twists and turns. After combing through wind studies, magnetic anomalies, whispered legends, and military secrets, the dancing forest still dances just beyond our grasp. Each theory, whether grounded in soil science or shamanic tradition, adds another brushstroke to a portrait we can't quite complete. The wind and sand explanation paints a compelling picture of nature's brute force, yet it stumbles over those precise, artistic spirals that seem too deliberate for random gusts. Geomagnetic theories offer tantalizing lab evidence, but why would invisible forces sculpt some trunks into rings while leaving their neighbors untouched? Even the most rational scientists admit the data feels like pieces from different puzzles. Soil shifts here, fungal whispers there, all hinting at a bigger pattern we're not seeing. Then there are the stories that cling like lichen to the bark. Locals who swear the trees rearrange themselves after heavy rains, or visitors who capture shadows in their photos that weren't there when they pressed the shutter. The forest thrives on these contradictions, feeding our hunger for answers while coyly withholding the key. Maybe that's the true magic of this place, not in proving one theory right, but in keeping all possibilities alive, from the pragmatic to the profound. So where does that leave us? With a living riddle that defies categories. A grove where biology, physics, and folklore twine together like roots in sandy soil. Perhaps the mystery isn't meant to be solved, but experienced, a reminder that even in our age of satellites and algorithms, some wonders refuse to be quantified. The dancing forest isn't just a curiosity. It's a mirror held up to our own relentless need to explain, to name, to control. And maybe, just maybe, the trees lean close to whisper back, not everything bends to understanding. Now it's your turn. After journeying through the science and the stories, which explanation resonates with you? Do the twists stem from hidden forces in the earth or something even stranger? Drop your theory in the comments. We're all detectives in this grove of endless questions. Who knows, the next big clue might be lurking in your observation. After all, some secrets grow best when watered with curiosity.